Hello and welcome back to Krashy Dual Force. Today we're going to be diving into a beginner guide for DC Dual Force. Now this channel here is called Willow Snapping. He is a TCG player, former Snap player, now really looking to transition to DC Dual Force. I haven't watched most of their videos, but I've been hearing, just looking on Twitter and things, that this person is heavily invested in DC Dual Force, and they made a beginner guide. So we're going to take a look at it. Looks like they're getting some good traction. So big shout outs to Willow for putting in all of this work already, coming out with tactics reviews, lots of content to watch. So check out the link in the description. As someone new, I'm trying to learn the game. I barely found out about this game days ago, and they're about to start doing a creator streaming event that I'm not involved in, unfortunately. I wish I could have got into, but I just haven't known about the game. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at this video. We're going to kind of react to it, learn about the game, and get really invested in DC Dual Force, because this is a game that I'm very, very excited about. Let's go ahead and dive in. Again, links in the description. Yeah, let's take a look.
It's not long now until we're all going to have a chance to play DC Dual Force. This coming weekend, some streamers are going to get a chance to play the game, including myself, and just 1 week later, the public will have access to the game through a limited beta period. So it felt like a good time to put out a beginner's guide to DC Dual Force. This is going to go over everything you could possibly need to know about DC Dual Force. Some stuff we've already talked about, but I think most of this video you're going to be hearing for the first time. In this video, we're going to cover the game's resource system, all of the keywords, unique mechanics you might not be aware of, the charge system, what deck building is like, and what deck building restrictions exist inside the game. I love the artwork. How card generation works. Pretty much this is your one-stop shop for all things DC Dual Force. I hope you learned something. Let's get into it. In the center of your 3x2 grid, your little area of the game board, you've got two little symbols here. These symbols are your resources. In this example, they're blacked out. That means you don't have any resources. And that's how you're going to start the game. But at the beginning of your first turn, you're going to get one bronze resource. You can spend a bronze resource playing any bronze card in the game. Then come the beginning of your next turn, whatever leftover resources you have will be eliminated, and you'll start the turn off with two bronze resources.
This is very common to me.
To play any
Makes a lot of sense.
Cards in your hand. This process will continue. You'll get a silver and a bronze resource the following turn, then a silver and a silver resource, then finally a gold and silver resource on turn 5. On turn 6, you will not progress to 2 golden resources. You max cap out at exactly 1 gold resource and 1 silver resource. There are other cards in the game that let you generate resources, and if you generate a resource, that resource is added on top of your existing resources. So let's say, for example, we're on turn 2 and we have access to our 2 bronze resources and we have a Green Lantern power ring. We can play that power ring. It'll use up one of our bronze resources and then generate us 2 more. So we'll now have 3 bronze resources. I don't know what that will look like on the UI, but I can confirm that that is indeed how that works. All right, with resources out of the way, I think it's time we jump on to some keywords. We're going to
so resources, it's very simple to me. Whenever I read the kind of blog post about resources, it's very, very simple, right? Like it's tempoed out like mana, like energy. It makes a lot of sense. The generation is going to be really cool. And like you said, I don't know how it's going to look like on the UI, but I'm excited to see what it looks like. There's definitely a good bit of cards. I've kind of barely started to look through them that have generation. But even so, just knowing that like turn 5, 6, 7, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is going to be, 1 gold, 1 silver, and kind of get you in the headspace of what that section of the game is going to start looking at. Now, this next part, I'm really excited about keywords, because I know there are a lot of them, but I haven't seen basically anything about any of the keywords. And actually, I mean, even just like a lot of this stuff, I skimmed through this video a little bit. I don't know anything about, so very excited to see how this game works.
We go in alphabetical order, starting off with Adrenaline. Adrenaline reads, while your hand is empty, this ability is active. The easiest card to look at for this is Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn reads end, Adrenaline, draw a card. So if at the end of your turn, your hand would be empty, you will draw a card. Ambush. Ambush reads, if this character KOs a character it attacks, it does not take damage back. There's no retaliate damage if you manage to successfully kill off a target. For an example, if an Azrael was to attack into, I don't know, let's say a John Diggle, Azrael will attack, destroy him, and now Azrael will not receive any damage.
So that means that normally I would assume that cards have retaliation damage. So like if each card has a power and a defense, I don't know if that's what they're called, and you were to strike another card, you're taking that damage as well inherently just because you're striking. I'm hoping that I'm understanding that correctly, but that seems very common to me in particular card games. So I think that would make a little bit of sense here as well.
Any other unit without ambush would have taken 2 damage as a result of attacking into.
Yeah, that's exactly what that is.
Okay. The next time this character would be affected by an enemy's ability or action, it isn't. Just as a friendly reminder that actions is what you've probably referred to in other card games as spells or instants. And the ability section of this keyword is specifically referring to leader abilities. It's worth mentioning that if a leader's ability involves gaining attack and then they attack into a recruit that has aura is not going to save that recruit from that attack, because the thing that is affecting them is the attack from that leader, not the ability. Deploy. When this card enters the battlefield, activate this ability. Just an interesting note, this keyword does not refer to playing a card from your hand, which means if the card is to enter the battlefield through any method, it will resolve its deploy ability. End just means when your turn ends, resolve this ability. Firepower. Your cards and ability. End just means
deal 1 damage. Okay, so end is the keyword. What the end is card specific. When the turn ends, this ability activates. So, okay. And we saw that a little bit over on Adrenaline because it was also an end. So, yeah, okay. So end keyword's pretty simple to understand.
When your turn ends, resolve this ability. Firepower. Your cards and abilities deal additional non-combat damage equal to your total firepower. Yes, this includes action cards, recruits with abilities
that's called
that
firepower
deal damage,
then? I don't know.
leader abilities. Evade. The next time this character is attacked, the attack is avoided.
Nice.
That means no damage is dealt on either side. The attacker does not receive damage, and the person being attacked does not receive damage. So effectively, an evade unit just chews up an attack without having to actually be attacked. Flurry reads, can attack twice each turn.
Okay.
Guard. Your front row characters with guard protect all other friendly characters. You've probably had a keyword like this in another card game you've played, but something that's interesting about this keyword in this card game is that the guard character needs to be played on the front row. So if you've got a strong guard card in your hand, but for whatever reason you don't want that guard to be active, you can always just play that card on the back row to prevent guard from being active. Hidden. Can't be the target of enemy attacks, actions, or abilities, and doesn't protect other characters. Hidden is removed at the start of your turn. Hunter.
So that's like a Hearthstone thing. I can't remember what it was called. In Hearthstone, you could play a card and it was like on the field, but it was like stealthed. So it's essentially the same thing. Like it's not going to block anything, but you can just like play a card and like it's basically like free from being attacked for like 1 turn. And unless there's a hunter, apparently.
Can attack hidden and otherwise protected characters.
That's funny.
That means if
that's
you've
like
got
a penetration
in front
card
of your leader, it's going to be no match for a hunter character because the hunter character can go right over the top of any blocker, and of course it can target hidden units. Invincible. Can't be damaged or KO'd. Lethal. KO any recruit this card damages. Parting shot. When this character is KO'd, activate this ability. This does not resolve when the character is replaced. More about replacing in the next section of this video. Shield.
Not replace, but if a character's KO'd, then it'll activate an effect.
Next time this character would be damaged, prevent it. Speed. Can attack on the turn it's deployed. And start.
That's like haste.
When your turn starts, this ability activates. I do also want to mention, even though it's not technically a keyword, Seek. By default, Seek will show you 3 different options, and you'll pick one of those options, create it, and put it into your hand. The reason Seek is not a keyword
this is also something from Hearthstone, if I remember correctly.
For example, Batman has the word Seek in his ability, but it only shows you 2 different options. Here are some other terms that aren't exactly keywords that I want to go over really quickly. Bonus attack. If a card has bonus attack, their first attack will not exhaust them. In addition to that, a bonus attack can be made by a unit that is already exhausted. Everywhere. Everywhere affects cards in all zones. That includes your hand, deck, and battlefield, but it also includes cards that are created at a later date. For example, if you use Aquaman's ability on turn 3, when you use Aquaman's ability again on turn 6, the newly created sea creature will not only have +1/+1 from that activation, but will also have +1/+1 from the previous
I'm gonna have to see some of this stuff. This guy's got a lot of game knowledge.
It'll KO a friendly character, even if they're invincible or would otherwise be protected for whatever reason. Summon. We haven't got the chance to talk about this in a video yet, but if a card specifically says that it's summoning something, so in the case of, again, Aquaman, we'll continue to bring up Aquaman because he's an easy example, that summon creates a new card and deploys it at a random space. So if you have 3 spaces open, you can't control where that sea creature is going to land. It's just going to land somewhere. I also want to go over some deck building stuff because I think some people are a bit lost on that. In DC Duel Force, the very first thing you do is
this was super new to me.
Leaders. You can either select 2 leaders from the same faction or 1 leader from one faction and 1 leader from another. If you select 2 leaders from the same faction, your entire deck must be made up of 40 cards from that faction. You can run 2.
Oh, whoa, that's super interesting. So if you select 2 leaders from the same faction, you can add 40 cards from the select faction. If you have 2 leaders from different factions, you can only have 20 cards. Oh, you have to. No, I see. You have to have 20 cards from each faction. Okay. I didn't even understand the concept of factions or leaders. If you watched my last video, then you probably know I was like very confused about cards because I'm barely diving in. So that's really, really interesting. So I don't know the faction names, but obviously assuming, you know, Harley Quinn and Joker are the same faction, then you're making like a full deck about, I think they're called Tyranny. I think I do remember reading something like that on Twitter. Well, just for the sake of this video, let's call them Tyranny faction. And you're making a full Tyranny deck. Okay. Wow. That's really cool.
Entire deck must be made up of 40 cards from that faction. You can run 2 copies of any card, with the exception of ultimate cards, which can be identified by this yellow rarity gem in the middle of their card.
Okay.
You can only run 1 copy per ultimate card. That doesn't mean you can't run 2 ultimate cards, it just means you can't run 2 copies of that same ultimate card. If you pick one leader from one faction and another leader from another faction, you must have an even split of 20 cards from each of those factions. That means you can't have 18 cards from one faction and 22 cards from another. It must be exactly 2020. The win condition in Duel Force is removing all enemy leaders,
I figured
just
as much.
the 2 default leaders that the opponent starts off with. If the opponent manages to get in play another leader, there are currently 2 ways to do this: Heart of Darkness and Unexpected Help. In either case, you must...
Okay, I want to read those. Transform a damaged friendly recruit into Eclipso with 3 charges, and Eclipso's a leader. So you could create another leader, and then that would have to be eliminated. And then Unexpected Help is if you have fewer than 2 leaders, summon a Might, Energy, or Tactics leader. They have 10 defense and 3 charges. Okay, so yeah, the win condition is to defeat the leaders, however many that there may be.
Remove that newly created leader and both of their default leaders. The maximum hand size in DC Duel Force is 10 cards. If you go to draw from an empty deck, you lose the game. Outside of external effects that generate you charge, you can only gain 1 charge per turn on each of your leaders. However...
Wait. If you go to draw from an empty deck, you lose the game. Does that mean that mill decks will be a thing? Surely they will be. I'm sure that makes a decent amount of sense.
You can't sit there and stack up as much charge as possible to use the same leader ability multiple times a turn, because leader abilities are hard limited to once per turn per leader. So you could use Cyborg and Aquaman's ability in the same turn, but you couldn't use 2 activations of Cyborg's ability. In DC Duel Force, you have the ability to replace recruits that are on your battlefield. Okay. Let's say, for example, you've got a really strong card on your back line, and you've got some other random cards on your front line, and your opponent plays a card like Straitjacket on your card that's on the back line. Now what do? Your board's full, you can't play any cards. Well, thankfully, they've built in a mechanic to directly counter situations like this. If you're playing a recruit from your hand, you may do so replacing a recruit on your board, but it won't trigger any parting shot effects or anything.
You're
that
literally just swapping the card out.
It's destroyed because technically the card's not getting quote unquote destroyed, it's just getting replaced. Speaking of full board spaces, if you do have a full board and you try to summon a card using some type of external effect,
it's just not going to work.
Again as an evergreen example,
probably
the card will have nowhere to summon and it will simply be destroyed, but the rest of the effect can still resolve. So if you had a full board of sea creatures, but you still wanted to give them all +1/+1, you could do that with Aquaman's effect, but you wouldn't get a new sea creature. If your board is empty and you try to play a card like Miss Martian or Mordru, they will target themselves. So Miss Martian would come into play and then return herself to hand, and Mordru would simply destroy himself. Generation effects will be generated from a global pool of cards. So if you were to use a card like Flex, who generates a random bronze action, that action will be pulled from every single faction in the game, not just the Might faction or not just your available factions.
Gets pretty wild then.
It will pull from everything. Okay, that's pretty much everything I could think to go over.
This game's so wild. Much more comprehensive than I was expecting.
Immediately clear, and things that aren't necessarily gone over in any.
Again, big shout outs to Willow. Check out the link in the description. I think he's doing a phenomenal job with DC Duel Force content. Like I said, I heard about the game like 2-3 days ago. I decided to start paying attention to it like a day ago, and I've been a little bit IRL busy, but this game looks absolutely awesome. Friends, please drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel for future DC Duel Force content. I'm very excited about this game. I'm looking forward to watching creators play it and maybe even getting in myself. As always, be sure to be kind of one another. Tell someone you love them, and I'll see you in the next video.